All right, let's talk about how power really works in the UK. Because if you've ever looked at the British government, you might have noticed it doesn't quite follow the textbook rules you see elsewhere. It's this fascinating puzzle, and today we're going to unpack the unique way power is divided, or maybe a better word is blended.
So, to really get our heads around this, here's our plan. First, we'll look at the classic idea of separation of powers. Then, we'll dive right into the UK's very different reality, what's called a fusion of powers. After that, we'll explore some of the gray areas in lawmaking, see what actually stops the government from getting too powerful, and finally, check out some huge reforms that have really reshaped the whole system.
Okay, first things first. To understand what makes the UK system so different, we have to start with the ideal model. You know, the classic blueprint that most people think of for a safe, free, and fair government.
Now, this isn't just some dry organizational chart. At its very heart, the separation of powers is a design for liberty. The whole point is to build checks and balances directly into the system, making it structurally, almost physically, impossible for any one group to get absolute control.
And this powerful idea really comes from the French philosopher Montesquieu. His argument was pretty simple and pretty profound. If the same people who make the laws also have the power to enforce them, what's to stop them from creating tyrannical laws and then carrying them out? It's the classic case for protecting citizens from the whims of government.
So, the idea is you have these three distinct pillars. The executive, that's the government, their job is to implement and enforce the laws. The legislature, that's parliament, their job is to make the laws. And the judiciary, the courts, they're the referee, interpreting those laws and settling disputes. In theory, everyone stays in their own lane. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. Is this neat and tidy theory how the UK actually operates? Well, the short answer is not really. And this is where the UK takes a very, very different path.
Yeah, instead of a strict separation, the UK system is much better described as a fusion of powers. It's a far more pragmatic and, honestly, a much messier overlap of roles.
And this right here is the absolute core of the difference. While that classic model is all about building walls between the branches of government, the UK system, well, it builds bridges. And the most important bridge of all is the one that connects the people who run the government and the people who make the laws.
This is the key to everything. The Prime Minister isn't elected separately like a US president. No, they must be a member of Parliament, and they choose their cabinet ministers, the people running the government, from sitting MPs and members of the House of Lords. So can someone be in more than one branch of government? In the UK, for top ministers, it's a requirement. Now, this fusion creates a really clear trade-off. On the plus side, it can make government incredibly efficient. The executive has a built-in majority in the legislature, so it can actually pass the laws it promised to pass. But the huge downside is the risk of what's called executive dominance, where a government with a big majority can basically bulldoze its agendas through Parliament with very little meaningful resistance.
And it gets even more complicated. The lines of power get even blurrier when you look at how some laws are actually made. And it's not always on the main floor of Parliament. Okay, check this out. It's called delegated legislation. Parliament will pass a big, broad law. That's the primary legislation. But it gives government ministers the power to fill in all the nitty-gritty technical details later. It's kind of like Parliament draws the outline of a picture and then just hands the crayons over to the government to color it in. The justification for this is pretty simple. It's fast and efficient. Let's be honest, Parliament doesn't have time to debate every single tiny rule change. But the criticism is also pretty powerful. Critics argue this shifts a huge amount of actual lawmaking power directly into the hands of the executive, happening in ministerial offices far away from the public eye.
So that brings us to the judges. This is a classic constitutional debate, and it really gets to the heart of what the judiciary's role is supposed to be. Can unelected judges actually create law? And the answer is a very careful, very qualified yes.
So judges shape the law in basically three main ways. First, through what's called common law. That's the massive body of law built up over centuries just from the decisions made in individual court cases. Second, by interpreting the laws Parliament writes. I mean, when a law has a vague phrase, judges have to decide what it actually means in the real world. And third, under the Human Rights Act, they have to try and read laws in a way that aligns with our fundamental rights.
And this gets to a fundamental truth of the UK Constitution: parliamentary sovereignty. While some people definitely argue that it's undemocratic for unelected judges to be making law, their power has a very firm limit, a hard stop. Judges can interpret, they can shape, but they can never overrule a clear act of Parliament. At the end of the day, Parliament always has the final word.
So, you've got this fused system where the government holds a ton of power. What stops it from just doing whatever it wants? Well, Parliament isn't just a lawmaking factory. Its other, absolutely crucial job is scrutiny. Let's look at the toolkit it has to keep the executive in check.
And this is Parliament's arsenal, right here. You've got ministers on the hot seat every week, forced to answer direct questions. You have powerful cross-party select committees that act like watchdogs, digging deep into what government departments are up to. The House of Lords acts as a vital revising chamber, often spotting flaws that the Commons missed. And maybe the most important tool of all, the government can't spend a single penny without Parliament's explicit approval.
But even with all of those checks, there was this growing feeling for a long time that the system was seriously unbalanced in one crucial area: the independence of the courts. And this led to a massive constitutional shakeup.
You see, for centuries, there was this role called the Lord Chancellor. And this person was the ultimate example of fusion. Just get this. They were a senior government minister in the cabinet. They were the head of the judiciary and the country's top judge. And they were the Speaker of the House of Lords. One person with a foot in every single branch of government.
So, the landmark Constitutional Reform Act of 2005 came in and tackled this clear conflict of interest head-on. It did three huge things. First, it created the brand new independent Supreme Court, physically separating the highest court from Parliament. Second, it stripped the Lord Chancellor of his judicial powers. And third, it created an independent commission for appointing judges, taking that power out of the hands of politicians.
So you see, the goal here wasn't to tear up the UK's traditional fused system and start over with an American-style separation. It was more of a surgical reform, a careful rebalancing act designed to strengthen the independence of the judiciary, a core pillar of the rule of law, all within the UK's flexible constitution.
And that really leaves us with the central question, the one that's still debated today. Is the UK's fusion of powers a smart, pragmatic compromise that gives us efficient and accountable government, or is it a system that dangerously concentrates power in the hands of the executive, with Parliament scrutiny tools always just playing catch-up? It's a debate that goes right to the very heart of Britain's unwritten constitution.